Welcome to episode 33 of Concussion Chats. My name is Tam. Concussion Chats is a podcast hosted by the McGill Students for the Concussion Legacy Foundation with the help of Nick from Concussion Talk podcast. We are dedicated to providing strength and hope to those recovering from concussions through sharing experiences. Today I have a recording of our guest speaker, Blair. Blair spent over 9 years in the Canadian Forces and was medically released due to the compounded effects of concussions throughout his life. He finished a degree in Human Kinetics this month and will be starting a master's of physical therapy this upcoming fall.
Hello. Yeah, so my name is Blair. Currently I live in Newfoundland, so I'm pretty far east. And while I was in the military, I lived in Edmonton, and that was not quite as nice as Newfoundland can be, although I'm looking forward to getting to London, Ontario to start my master's. So a little bit about my story, I guess. I was a pretty competitive hockey player my entire life. My dad put on skates around 3-4 years old, and I haven't taken them off other than for a few years here and there with my injuries. What else is there about the early day? I guess I really identified as an athlete from a really young age. And I guess as you'll come to find out, I've kind of changed roles and try to pull people out of that identification, because it kind of can have some pretty big impacts on your mental health once that athlete piece isn't there anymore. But when I was in Pee Wee hockey, I sustained a concussion, and that concussion laid me back for about 4 months. And that's kind of the beginning of the whole compounded effects of concussions journey. That was the first one that was on record, and it was really tough. I kept trying to go back too early. There was no one really knew what to do for a concussion back then. I don't think we really do right now fully either. I think we're getting there, but we're certainly not in the space where we're super effective. But they kept putting me back, return to play. And I was throwing up on the ice. I was getting sick on the ice. And then they put me in game situations and the same thing. It was just not a good time. And these types of concussions, this happened twice more up until I was in Bantam and then going into midget hockey. All the while I was still playing competitive hockey, and there was never really a focus on my health and how I was doing, even though there was a lot of obvious signs and almost cries for help with my behavior and irritability that were going on. And I kind of healed to a certain point when I was 16 years old, and I was kind of done with hockey because I was tired of the pressure that was put on me by people I knew, coaches, even family. My dad coached, and I love him to death, but he was very hard on me when it came to hockey. And so I ended up joining the reserves at 16 years old. So I joined the Canadian Forces as a part-time member in 2009. And I was doing really, really well with it. And so much so that I left university to join full-time when I was 20. I think I was late 20s or late 20, late into my 20th year. And I moved to Edmonton. And throughout that period of time, I thought that this was who I was going to be for the rest of my life. I loved every minute of it. I was an infantry soldier with PPCLI, and I just loved it. I think that it was just the real job for who I was at that point in time. And I did really well. I was kind of moving my way up through, and I was applying to become an officer in the near future. And then in January 2015, oddly enough, it was a military hockey tournament with no checking, and I got destroyed. And I don't know if you watch hockey, but when you get destroyed, that's not a good thing at all. So that happened, and I was put back to work too soon. And then we were in training, and I stepped out. I can't remember which one came first. I mix it up sometimes. But we were in training, and our LAV, so a LAV is a light armored vehicle that carries infantry soldiers, and you sit in the back of it, big metal thing. And with the front end of the lav hit a big bump, and so the front went down and the back popped up. And no one wears their helmets in the back. I mean, it's sad, but hopefully after what I went through, some more people started wearing their helmets. And then I had like a compression injury, so concussion up and came back down. My neck kind of was damaged in the process as well. And then I was too scared to tell anyone what was going on because I just came back from a concussion that everyone already didn't believe I was going through, even though I was very nauseous in the mornings and I wasn't myself. I was so irritable that, and in the infantry, it's hard to tell when someone's being extra irritable because almost everyone that's in charge of you is super irritable anyway. So it's hard to really see that. But so that continued on, and then it was like 2 or 3 days later, it was icy in the middle of February, and then I stepped off the bus in a parking lot, and something simple like that, and I slipped on the ice and smashed the back of my head up against the bottom stair of that bus. And up until about a year and a half ago, I don't know who I was. I had a very hard time from 2015, late 2015 onward until 2018. I was waiting to get medically released. And in that time frame, I want to say that I spent approximately 60% of my time in bed. My battery was about 15-minute spurts. There was no grocery stores. There was no drive. Like the most I had was they used to make me drive into work once or twice a week and check in with my boss, who was less than understanding. And that pretty much took my battery for a week, just trying to navigate how to talk to this person just to get through the day. And in 2018, we moved back to Newfoundland from Edmonton, and I was medically released in May. And I began going to school I initially started in kinesiology, and then I ended up switching to therapeutic recreation in my last year so I could graduate a little bit quicker. So I did the kinesiology program, and I met so many great people who seemingly understood concussion. And along that way, I started an Instagram page where I kind of developed a community and found people and connected with them. And these people they really know their own experience and how to connect that to your experience. And that's really powerful. And I assume that's why you folks are here today, because there is so much power in the community and it's really therapeutic. But to continue onward, like I've went through school and I started out and I could only do one course. I did that one course online and that was tough. And then I bumped it up the next term. I did 2 online and that was a little bit easier. And then I had a very major setback when I tried to do 2 courses in person. That didn't go well. And but I took time off. I took the winter semester and the summer semester off. And I do recognize that where I was released from the military, like it gives me a unique opportunity to heal. I wouldn't call it a privilege because there's certain points in time where it's not easy to deal with, but it is somewhat of a privilege to have a funding to take that break. But I took that break and then I came back, I think it's fall of 2019, and I was like on a mission to get through this kinesiology degree, which ended up being a therapeutic rec degree, to get into physiotherapy. Because one of like the cornerstones in my recovery was my physiotherapist, and her name is Kim Furlong, and she's the owner of NL Balance Indigenous here in St. John's, Newfoundland. And the asset that she's been in my recovery is, you can't even really quantify it because she's just so exceptional at what she does. But through doing vestibular training, and one of the most important things was the sub-symptom threshold aerobic activity. And I also worked with a psychologist for cognitive behavioral therapy. But between these things, like the vision therapy and seeing her, I made leaps and bounds. And those leaps and bounds weren't made while I was still serving in the military and trying to recover from the injury, because there's no one there that had this knowledge. But we're going to get there, and I believe we will. It's just going to take a lot of pressure by people like myself once I graduate. But I made a lot of leaps and bounds, and I struggled, but I got myself up to a full course load. And ultimately, I did intercession just now. I finished last week, and that's my undergrad completed. And I was accepted into University of Western Ontario for my master's in physical therapy. And I'm very excited about that because that's been the end game and end goal from my undergrad from the second I hit that medical release day onward. Thanks, Wendy. And I think it's just really important to know that when you're going through a concussion and you're living with a concussion, there is this community that you're seeing. Like I'm not sure what the numbers are here today. I know it seems a bit lower, but the people who are actually in the community, there's hundreds of thousands of people. And that's not an understatement. There are so many people who are in your shoes, and there's so many people to draw inspiration from. And even on your worst days, there's people that are going to listen. And that's what's ultimately going to get you to the end game. And, but yeah, and then when I go into physio this fall at Western, there's actually a Concussion Legacy Foundation chapter at Western who I've been speaking to. And I'm really hoping to work with them. And I've worked with Heads Up Can, and there's a few people that are within their community that are based out of London. And also, I guess another interesting thing is that since November, I started training for triathlon. I got to the point with my aerobic capacity where my subsymptom threshold was at 150 beats per minute. And for someone my age, my maximum heart rate is theoretically 192. So that's about, I think, 60 to 65% of my max. And when you're doing subsymptom threshold training, you really have to be cautious and write down what you're experiencing, how you're feeling. But I was good at that, and I could sustain that effort. So I've gotten really heavily involved in that, and it's been a really great experience. I've met a lot of people, and I've been able to push that subsymptom threshold barrier through that endurance training, which I think is kind of unique, and I'm interested to look into it in the future, up to about 160, 165, which is almost back to whatever normal is. I don't know if I'll ever be normal. I'm a bit of an oddball. If you actually meet me in person, I have a weird sense of humor. But that's just it. And I also coach hockey. That's something I began in 2019 because I couldn't really play anymore. And circling back there, I love hockey. And as much damage as it's done to me, I guess I'll never step away from the sport. And I really, truly love coaching hockey. And I think one of the unique aspects I have is I coach high performance hockey. I know they're young, so saying high performance is kind of not great because I coach U11, which is formerly known as Atom hockey. But these kids are high performance now because that's the way we live. And that's everyone. But the reason why I chose this population is because they're the ones who need people that have been through it the most. They're the most at risk for those injuries because it's so high speed. And they also need someone who understands that you can't just go back after a week unless you're cleared, unless you've done all the things you need to do. There's boxes that need to be checked now. And if you're not checking those boxes and someone that hasn't experienced it isn't around, they might let you go by. And that's something that I hadn't experienced since there was a knee injury my first year with someone, and there was a mild concussion at the beginning of the season this year with one of our 9-year-olds. He was he did everything, and I was surprised. I told his dad, these are the people who you should go see. He went and seen them, and there was zero resistance, and he was 16 days from contact to being back on his trial run on the ice. And that seems like an eternity to a child. But he's doing better now because some of the things that he did for his retraining have actually been able to help his performance on the ice. So he wasn't resting and just sitting in a dark room. He was being engaged in different activities when his threshold allowed that to happen and his battery was charged to that point. But I think it's important that if you have the experience and if you've been through something and something means something to you and you can be involved in it in a different shape, I think it's important for you to put yourself in that situation. And that doesn't mean scare people. Like, I make it very clear to everyone I coach and all the parents, like, I will talk about this with your children, but I will make very clear that if you do the right things, this is a road that you will hopefully not go down. But it's just something that whether it doesn't matter what sport it is or what activity it is, just be involved and be there because your experience is really valuable. But I don't know if there's a whole lot more. I mean, there's a lot more, but that's about as much as I can share in one wind.
Today, I have Nick from Concussion Talk podcast and his co-host Aaron, who is also the coordinator for the Newfoundland and Labrador Brain Injury Association, joining me. So you guys met with Blair recently.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Aaron, I'll let you did you're excited about his news about Western.
Yeah. So when we interviewed Blair on Nick's Concussion Talks podcast, he was waiting to hear from Western. So it was really nice to hear his share in the group about how he got in. Amazing. Congratulations, Blair, if you're listening.
Yeah. Blair.
Yeah, but no, it was really great to hear because like when we did that interview with him, which also everyone should go listen to as well, for some more context, because it was a different description as well. What he talked about with us was kind of more his recovery and that kind of stage of it, where like his share with you guys was obviously more about going through the actual concussions and like his story along that timeline, which was neat because I didn't know some of the aspects that he mentioned. But yeah, no, he was still a bundle of nerves about getting in and all that. So it was really nice to hear the happiness in his voice come out about how he's going on and fulfilling that dream. And it's kind of amazing that he'll be able to do that in an area he's so passionate about now. And like, I remember I asked him in the original interview too, like if that had always been his like dream. And at first he was like, well, first it was like NHL hockey, of course, but then he was kind of always interested in that area. So it's nice to see that like it kind of all looped back.
Yeah.
My sound wacky. I'm trying to do this sound. I'll just speak lower. I think this settles it down. Can you hear me? Okay, good. That's perfect. All right. No, I didn't know about his hockey career pre-brain injury, really, concussion. I knew he started talking to us about his incident in the lab, and I remember saying, "What's a lab?" And so. Yeah, so military, and he started talking to us about his concussions, and maybe that's why I started asking him about stuff. So he kind of felt like he had to answer that question. But it was like Karen was saying, it was great they got into Physio Western, and I know a few people who've done that program as well, and I know it's a great program. So, and as I mentioned off the air, I think off the air, but I'm sure I'll see him. I'll probably hit into that neck of the woods in whenever I'm allowed to. Maybe before he gets there, but August, September, right? And it will just be cool to see him introducing some people that I know that have done the program and that may have stuff to tell them, although they've done it a while ago. But still.
Yeah. I also just really enjoyed his share just because like there were so many different levels to it that related to me and like my life in one way or another. Like, I played hockey too, for one, of course, but just the fact that like he was in the military, and him talking about, like the military and how like they like handle concussions and stuff. It kind of like reminded me of like my stepdad. He was in the military. He was medically released now, but they were doing like this like combat course thing, and he got a concussion, and like I don't really think anything was done or taken seriously. And just Blair was talking about later on just how like once he left the military, that's when like his recovery really started. And like and it's crazy that that's the case, but that's the reality. And then we were talking about, like I mentioned to him that like, you know, my stepdad was in the military, and that's kind of why I want to be like a psychologist for like people in the military. Now I don't know, because I want to be involved with the concussions, and I want to be involved, like it's so many different things, but and just kind of like how like he wants to like make things better for other people, and like and I don't know, that's kind of something that I guess that's kind of my goal with the whole like be a psychologist thing. And just like when he was mentioning, you know, if you like when he was talking about like coaching hockey now, and how like how like he coaches it, and how when you're like someone that's been through something and you can help other people with it, like you should do it, like if you can, and just like how valuable it like your experience is since you've been through it, and it's important to be in a position to help people, because your own experiences are really valuable. And I think that kind of goes back to like my kind of career goal thingies, because it's more like work with military kids, you know, like when you go through something, using your thing to help other people. And I think it's awesome that he's like coaching Adam hockey, and it's more like the high performance, like the rep kids, and he's having these conversations with like the kids and the parents, and like he's not trying to scare them, he's just trying to make people see, you know, the importance of it. And it's awesome that he, you know, had a great experience with his physio, and now like he's going to school for it and wants to help more people with all that stuff too.
Yeah. On that note, Taya, you reminded me of a place, and I want to shout it out on here as well. So have you ever heard of Mindshift Clinic?
Yes.
It's in Lincoln, next to Armagdo, where you and I are both kind of from.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was supposed to do an internship there, but they do almost exactly what you're interested in. And I think you should reach out to the psychologist there.
Oh.
I will send those details, but to let people know, Mindshift Clinic is a neuro and biofeedback clinic and counseling service, where essentially your neuro and biofeedback it measures your brain waves essentially, and those get analyzed by a set of team members that are like multidisciplinary. So it would be psychologists, it would be counselors, it would be physiologists, it would be physiotherapists, all of that kind of one space. And a lot of military members go through there for PTSD, and also concussions come through, and they kind of have a full encompass clinic there. But don't know if we have any listeners from that area, but a very interesting clinic, very good spot. Completely struck my mind when you were talking about it. I was like, that is that.
Yeah, I was wondering why you were like,
yeah, no, I was like looking at them.
She was like pointing her finger. She was like typing away. I was like, what's going on? Okay.
And actually, when we first met in like last September or October, whatever, you mentioned that you were, because I asked about the Hamilton, the brain injury and the program in Hamilton.
Yeah, that was another internship I was supposed
but
to do.
You mentioned this one is the internship at this place, but then it followed over because of the whole stuff, you know.
Yeah, because of COVID.
because of that thing.
Yeah.
So, and I interviewed Kim Furlong, his physiotherapist, interviewed her in April of last year. So I talked to his physiotherapist this time, and I visited her, Kim, a bunch of times. So her place is in, I don't know how many listeners you have in St. John's, but except for St. Aaron. But
That's really cool.
in St. John's, it's just on Portugal Road, not Portugal Road, Newco Road and Elizabeth Avenue. And so it's just next to Piazza Pizza on Elizabeth Avenue. And yeah, it's an amazing place. And I've been to her a few times, and she's great. And her other physios, and also my physio, who helped me a bunch Jen Shears, who have mentioned a million times in this podcast, for these podcasts. She did a little like hiatus kind of. She's what's it called? It's a comment there in basically in 20 early 2020, because we were actually the last notice I saw her was the day before we had a big snowstorm here in last January. So, but yeah, so
Cool.
it's just interesting that I mean, it's not really that interesting because it's the same city. It's not a big city, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh, small world, but no, it's a
no,
small
it is
town.
small. It is
Not.
small.
You're in a small place. You're all
Yeah.
living in the same area.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And
That's
when you
gonna
told me he was saying all this stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, but of course I do know those people are at that place because it's not a big place. But and now we can, I guess, mention if I see him this summer at behind ponds with small lakes for anyone who's wants to know what ponds are, and then so we'll see him there at the lakes this summer soon, probably, unless he goes to Ontario sooner. I don't know when, but yeah. But I like the substance and thresholds and stuff was interesting.
Yeah, that was really cool. And he like explained it later on a bit more to everyone. And like he explained how the like Buffalo treadmill test works and like the goal of it all. And then he also just kind of emphasized, like when you finish whatever you're doing, like you need to take the time to relax. And there were quite a few of us in the support group that were like,
is that the slingshot, right? The slingshot where you were talking about?
No. And then he was just talking about how like what he does is like he like has like a Epsom salt bath like 3 days a week, like really hot, 15 minutes, and like just like nothing else in there. Just like think about like how you feel, how you experience your aerobic activity, like stuff like that. And then he circled back to how pacing and planning is the number one thing, and we always talk about it, but it's easier said than done. And also just like on like the pacing and planning thing, when he brought up how like when he went back to school, like he was originally just doing like with like one course, and then he bumped it up, and just like how he took like he had a major setback, and then he had to take some time off, but he like was able to like come back, and like he was on a mission, like it was gonna happen. And I mean, he did it, like he finished his degree. He's going for his master's to Western, and yeah, it was awesome.
I think I think it's interesting how they he want to stay away from the athlete. It's like define somebody by if they're an athlete or whatever. But he took that mindset of just and it's more about his comfort level. He was comfortable doing that because his mindset. He's comfortable with his mindset, but you don't have to be an athlete to have that sort of mindset, or to even have, just because his is that sort of like structured. You know what you're doing, what you want to do, and you plan and stuff, and you take, you gotta take breaks and stuff, and you gotta plan certain things. But not everybody has that mindset, and just because it's more about the comfort of just having a mindset of a general idea of how you're going to attack your rehab instead of your recovery, not necessarily athlete focused or planning. If that's not your mindset,
I think more what he was saying was about like the identifying with being an athlete.
It was.
Because that is really hard. Like now that I'm not an athlete, like it, like saying that makes me like want to puke, and also like I just like I physically feel uncomfortable like saying that I'm not an athlete anymore, because that's what I knew for 21 years. Like I've been an athlete my entire life, and then saying now like I'm not an athlete is really weird.
I liked his you mentioned it briefly, like how he would take the baths and then like kind of just be grateful, note the feelings of how the aerobic exercise felt, and it's like how did that make me feel, and how that, and like taking note of that, and it's almost like a gratitude like note to your body, like instead of focusing on your deficits or like how you didn't reach a certain point, which I find like a lot of athletes are so goal oriented. It's like, I must reach this point. I must get this. I must do this. We have to win kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And instead going like, I'm so grateful that my body was able to run today. Like, just like, I felt really great when I was able to do like this exercise kind of thing. And like, that's a really nice reframing of it, because then you're still within that athletic definition, but you're just switching it up to a new goal kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think like part of that also just goes with like, he also mentioned how like he was seeing a psychologist for CBT. So we definitely learned some good coping skills through that too. And just, yeah, I think the like being more aware of what your body can do is definitely a really important part of it all. Rather than, you know, beating it up for not being able to do things.
And what do you think, like, too, of the definition of going from like, I am an athlete to like, I am athletic? Because like, arguably you're still athletic, like that kind of thing. Like, do you think that would have been a nicer shift for you?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that probably would have definitely been a better way to say things. I know part of my issue is like, I was like my knee injury in my hip. And then, I mean, I also had concussions, but that's not why I quit. Definitely should have been, but because of the knee, I quit. But, so that kind of limited my athletic ability. So I didn't even feel athletic at points was part of it. But I think the being able to be like, I am athletic thing, I think that's definitely a good way to reframe and not kind of tear yourself down, for sure.
Yeah, rather than like root your identity in the one word, kind of just be like, that is part of it. And when you say just athletic, like it just becomes part, and like otherwise you're still a whole happy, healthy person. Like,
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, even being an athlete, that's not all of who you are. Like you are so many other things too. So yeah, I think the athletic thing is definitely a good, yeah.
It's pretty serendipitous. Serendipitous is really a big dramatic word for it, but that NLBA is doing the sport concussion. You can cross plug, but I know that NLBA released a post this week about being a concussion, talking about concussions in sports. So Aaron's probably better at that than I am.
Yeah, no, we're offering presentations now. We've reached out as much as we can to most of the societies here about concussions. We've got one set up for sure with snowboarders. So we'll be focusing on that one. And I mean, a lot of this discussion too came to me because our current student intern, athletic as well, and she experienced a lot of concussions throughout her adolescence. And so she's kind of pushed the like, oh, I know a lot about this. And I was like, good, like run with it. Yeah. So it's been on my mind lately too. And it's just a reminder with Blair's story as well about like how impactful that is to have teachers in the place that have experienced it, and coaches, I guess, too, is what I should say.
Like, if like having, because I know like I had coaches where they clearly knew nothing about concussions. Like, I mean, when I went to like when I was playing high school rugby in New Brunswick, like the girls team, like we didn't even have coaches. Like they were just like girls, like women who had like graduated a couple years before, and like they would just volunteer and coach us. And so we didn't have like medical anything. Like if you got hurt, like, well, okay, like, you know, so no one really understood concussions there, obviously, because no one was trained in any of those things. And just like the fact that he has had the experience, so he can also just talk about like from his experience how it's been, how much it's impacted, and he can just kind of like not like prove that like it's serious, but like, you know, like that it is something that you do need to take seriously because XYZ could happen, you know?
Yeah. And I love like that he's like, I'm there to encourage the participants, but also the parents, like make sure that everyone is comfortable going forward with what I'm recommending, kind of thing. Because like obviously our goal within our presentations is to target coaches, parents, everyone all the public as much as possible, but we also made a specific one for athletes like themselves of the sport, to essentially like empower them more so to recognize the symptoms in themselves and take themselves out, because it'll in the long run be better for their sport and their love of it later.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing though is just coaches that like accept that you're like, I need out, like I'm not okay. I think that's a huge part of it too. But I think the special presentation for the athletes, where it's kind of like helping them like have the courage to like, you know, be like, hey, like I need out. That's really important, because there were countless times I played games where I was definitely concussed and definitely not okay, but I wanted to play. I didn't want to let the team down. I didn't want to lose out on playing time. I didn't want people to think I was, I don't know, weak or faking it or whatever, you know. And definitely regret not taking concussions more seriously.
Yeah, well, we're looking for personal testimonies. If anyone wants to hit us up, write something in, you can contact Nick and I'm sure he'll pass it on to me. All that stuff will be in the bio.
One
last thing that Blair talked about in our discussion was just how important it is to like talk about it. And because someone had said something about, you know, like they come to the meetings every so often, but like it's really hard to like talk about it. And he was just like, yeah, like it is really, really hard, especially like the first few times that you do it. Like it does get easier, and like it's hard because like you do feel like, you know, lost a piece of yourself, and but like you get to like, when you can make and allow yourself to be this new person and accept this new person, can be better than how you were before. It's it like changes everything. Like it's so empowering to own it, and but also it's important to recognize, you know, that like it's not your entire identity. And sharing it's really important. And you just talked about like, you know, the sense of community, and sharing stories with other people. And so another thing, if anyone wants to be a Thursday morning speaker, let us know. We're always looking for some. But yeah, sharing stories is so important, because like therapeutic for you, but then the people listening, like you never know who's listening, could be exactly what they need. And it also just kind of reminds people that, you know, like they're not alone. And like other people like understand it, especially when you're surrounded by a bunch of people who've never had concussions or dealt with PCS or anything like that. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
So come to support group meetings too, everybody. But yeah, all in all, I just really enjoyed Blair's share.
It was great.
It was
yeah.
awesome.
I was glad to hear more from him.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. So are the episodes coming out on the same day then?
No, that episode's
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yours is already out. Okay.
Episode
Okay, cool.
89.
I was gonna be like, that'll be weird. Like, like same time.
No, it's episode 89.
Oh, okay. Ooh,
And 94 bay on Tuesday. So
nice.
It was like 5 weeks ago. 6
Awesome.
weeks ago. Yeah.
All right. So we I was about to like start like ending a support group meeting. I was supposed to say, all right, so we've come to the end of our sharing portion of the day. But no. Okay. Thanks Nick for helping us do the podcast, and thanks again Blair for joining us and sharing your story with the group. We all really enjoyed it. And we will have a new podcast posted Monday morning. Our upcoming podcasts can be found on concussiontalk.com, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can find more information about our group on concussionmtl.com. Our free peer-to-peer support group is open to everyone, and we hold 4 weekly meetings. Thanks for listening. HeadCheck Health bridges gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.